Good morning. It is good to see you. We've been gone for a few days because the storms that came through Louisiana knocked everything out. But we're back on the air and it's good to see you. Come on with us to Galatians chapter 6 today. I wanted to talk about something that we talked about in Bible class here in Haynesville. In Galatians chapter 6 at verse 7, it says, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. For he who sows to the flesh will of the flesh reap corruption, but he who sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap everlasting life." I wanted to talk about that figure of planting, and that figure is used throughout Scripture, pretty much from beginning to end. Let's talk a little bit about what goes into that, what goes into the planting and the process. The first thing is, you have to have good seed. And what I mean by that is if you want tomatoes, you don't plant a watermelon seed. You don't get the fruit of the Spirit by not following the Spirit. You don't get the fruit of the Spirit by receiving and accepting and believing a lie. You have to believe the truth. You have to believe the Word. That is the seed. And then you have to water it. Any seed, you have to water. You have to be continuously fed. When we don't understand that, when we think it's enough to just get a little bit a few times a year, no seed flourishes in that conditions. You have to water it. You might also think about digging. You remember the Lord came to the fig tree in that parable, I should say, the parable of the fig tree. He comes to it, there's no fruit on it. He says, "Cut it down. Why does it take up space?" The man says, "Let me dig around it." And then he says something else we'll talk about here in a minute, but he says, "Let me dig around it." There's two different ways to dig. One is to aerate. Sometimes the ground is so hard that you have to dig it up. Well, sometimes the things in our life start crowding us out, the cares of this world, and things have to be dug up. Sometimes when you dig, you find big rocks, and they have to be taken out. I don't know of anything that will grow straight through a rock. You better get the rocks out. Some things just do not belong in good soil. You got to get rid of it. But the man said, "Let me dig around it," and he says, "Let me fertilize it." And that's the other thing. You have to be continuously fed, but every once in a while you need a good, deep feeding. And we're talking about spiritual matters here. And you need to understand that. You need a good, deep feeding every once in a while. You might also think about weeding. Is it easier to weed your garden when the weeds are little and tiny, or when the weeds are about hip high and they've put down roots? You need to examine yourself. We need to examine ourselves, make sure that there's not weeds in the garden, so to speak. And then we have to have patience. Any gardener, any farmer understands you have to have patience. The parable of the sower, the good soil, it bears fruit with patience. You have to have patience. And then, of course, what we understand is, as you do all those things, God gives the increase. And we need to understand that. Yes, we receive the Word. We water, we dig if necessary, we fertilize, we weed, we have patience, and God gives the increase. And we need to understand that. That's the idea. Let us sow, as it says, sow to the Spirit. Hope you enjoyed this study. God bless you. Be a blessing to others. We'll see you tomorrow morning.